Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to Our Issues Birmingham. Today's guest is Cam Ward, who's the director of the Alabama Pardon and Paroles Commission. Is that the right word?
Bureau of Pardon and Paroles, yes, yes, sir.
Bureau of Pardons and Paroles. I have known Cam for many years. I've tried to have him on the show in a variety of capacities he has served in public service. So welcome to the show. And give us a little overview of how you ended up in the position you're presently in, because I know you were in the legislative body and you're very proactive in trying to do some things with our criminal justice system that ultimately got you to where you are.
Well, I served for 20 years in the legislature, 8 years in the House, and then almost 12 years in the Senate. So,
Wow.
And then Governor Ivey appointed me to this position, which as you said, I have a passion for criminal justice. So it was great to have this opportunity to do what I love 24/7. And I've become director December 7th of this 2020. So I haven't been here quite 8 months yet. So I'm enjoying myself, but it's a great position to be in. As you said, I have a passion for criminal justice, which is how I think I got selected for this position.
Yeah. It's not a secret that the Alabama Department of Corrections, which I would think you have to work in close relationship with to some degree, has been under a lot of scrutiny as of late from the federal government over the conditions and overcrowding and things of that nature. What can you share with us about what's being done or what plans you might have for the future to try to make things better?
Well, I think the issue of the Department of Corrections, and not just them, but the criminal justice system as a whole, is it's complex. Everyone wants a simple solution. If I just pass this law or do this one thing, then it's fixed. And that's just not the case. Do I think, first of all, I know it's more talked about in the media than anything else, the construction issue.
Yeah.
Yes, we need new facilities. Right now, if I hired, as part of the federal lawsuit, if I hired 100 or 150 new mental health workers or rehabilitative programs or prison education programs to go in these facilities, there's nowhere for them to go the way those facilities are designed. You need new prisons, no question. Is that the total solution? No. I think you've got to have a better recidivism reduction rate, which is what my agency does, how you do reentry. You also need less violence on the inside. You also have got to figure out, what are you going to do about those who are coming in? Are those some you can divert from going to prison, the nonviolent offenders? So it's multifaceted. The real problem Alabama's always faced is we want a simple answer to a complex problem, and that's just not going to work.
So in the last legislative session, there was a move to go to some not necessarily private institution, but a private building of institutions that would be leased back to the state. But that didn't make it, did it?
No, that Governor Ivey, it wasn't legislation, it was Governor Ivey's administration wanted to lease from private companies prisons, but the state would run and operate the prisons. The only difference would be who was on the mortgage. I think the issue is you need new prisons. Now, how you get there is kind of semantics. I've never been in favor of private companies running prisons, and Governor Ivey hasn't suggested that either. But I think the idea is you just need new prisons. The issue of the legislature was, what's the cheapest way to do it?
Well, you've got a different issue too, and that is, in order to make room, we're overcrowded. You would agree with me on that.
Oh, anybody who disagrees is living on fantasy land, yeah.
So one of the mechanisms to relieve that is parole. But we seem to have an incredibly disproportionate number of parolees from a historical viewpoint, looking back from 2018 to as recent as yesterday.
Yeah.
Today is June 30th, and yesterday there was a hearing for paroles. I think 36 were considered and 3 were granted. So that's less than 10%.
Correct.
And the numbers have moved
Correct.
from 80% in 2018 to 22% year to date.
Correct.
And some of these people are I mean, nobody disagrees that violent offenders, people that are dangerous to the community, need to stay where they are. But when you have a property crime offense
Mhm.
or a drug possessor offense, don't we need to be trying to move those people back into society in some way through
Can't say
parole?
can't disagree with you. I think the issue is that my position, my office is I don't have a say on who gets pardoned and who gets parole. We get to recommend an agenda for them to consider, and then once we recommend them, the board has autonomy as to who they decide upon. And usually, in
Can
fact, once we recommend an agenda, they have their meetings, and then we get a list at the end of the day who they've granted and who they've denied.
um, aside from the governor's appointment to the board, who gets to decide who goes on the board?
The governor, the Speaker pro tem, no, I'm sorry, Speaker of the House, President pro tem of the Senate, Lieutenant Governor recommend 5 names. Then the governor picks one of those 5 names, and the Senate has to confirm them.
And right now, of course, the chairman is pretty prosecution oriented,
Mhm.
and some would say that that creates an imbalance. I'm not saying that it does or it doesn't. I'm just saying that's a perception.
It's a pendulum. It's happened over the years. Yes,
Yeah.
it swings back and forth over the years. Correct.
Uh, well, I want to go into it a little more when we come back from break. So we're going to take a short break. Don't go away. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. Speaking with Cam Ward about the Department of Pardon and Paroles. And what do we do to relieve prison overcrowding? You mentioned to me at break that there were some programs being put in place to help address those things I was referencing that would get space freed up for the more violent offenders, the ones that are the greater risk to reoffend, so that we can get people out of the counties. We got a bit of a buildup in the county jail system because
Yes.
the
Yes.
state's not taking them.
Right.
What sorts of programs? And then you have to address, how do you fund the people that you put in place to supervise the people that are paroled?
Well, as I talked about when we first came on the segment was, at the end of the day, it's a complex issue. Everybody talks about what do you do to reduce the front end, but on the back end, when somebody comes out, how do we reduce recidivism? Currently, the number in Alabama is roughly 30% recidivism rate
And
for
how does
people
that
who
compare
actually,
nationwide?
compared nationally, it's really good. You have states like Illinois, which is in the 70 percentile range.
Wow.
So we're actually not that bad on recidivism. But what I've seen over the years, data wise, is if you get someone a job and you make sure they have the proper supervision and treatment once they come out of prison, that number can drop as low as 8% recidivism. So why don't we invest in more of those programs? Because I think whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, what we can all agree upon is you get out of prison, what do we all want? Get a job, pay your taxes, and don't hurt somebody. We all agree on that. There are programs out there now. We're already spending money on it. Just for a fraction on the dollar, we invest more in that. It's going to reduce recidivism drastically. We're reopening Life Tech down in Washington County or Thomasville, Alabama. We're also doing the same thing in other programs in Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Madison County, Montgomery County, Mobile County. We can expand upon that. You can reduce recidivism. That helps relieve some of your prison overcrowding because people don't come back to prison again.
But if you're only paroling 20% of the applicants, are you filling up those programs with people? Or is it that the reason we're only releasing 20% is because we don't have anywhere for them to go for the training things you're
Well,
talking about?
I can't speak for the parole board. They don't answer to me and I don't answer to them. But I will say that we have currently supervised 24,000 people on parole. And I think
24,000.
if we could provide more programming for them, that helps reduce the number of people who commit crimes again and go back to prison.
Well, who is the parole board accountable to?
They're not. So under the statute passed in 2019 by the legislature, they don't answer. They only answer to. They don't answer anybody. They are each appointed to 6-year terms, and they have the sole vote on who gets pardoned and paroled, and then their decisions are not. They can't be overridden.
Wow.
And only those three now can say who gets a parole or pardon by majority vote.
Yeah.
And actually, under the statute, they don't even have to state why they gave the opinion they gave.
Well, every time I've ever appeared, and I don't bother to go, I sometimes think it's worse to have a lawyer with you at the parole board than it is to just have your family speaking on your behalf. Or, of course, the biggest problem in violent crimes, everything I'm saying really doesn't apply because, victims' families, I understand how they feel, especially when there's been a homicide or something. I'm really addressing nonviolent property
Sure.
crime type offenders.
Property crimes.
If you don't have any accountability, uh, it's a very bizarre setup to me. And you're saying this is legislation that was enacted in 2019 that made it like this?
Yeah, and actually they've been around that way. The only difference between 2019 and now is that prior to 2019, the board chairman basically appointed who the executive director of the Bureau of Pardon and Parole was, and then the board chairman managed the staff. So it's really always been that way. And the only change, the real big change in the 2019 statute, among others, is the bureau chairman, director, my job, is separate from the board altogether. We're independent altogether. 75% of my job is reentry and rehabilitation and monitoring those who are on probation or parole.
I see. Now, can you distinguish for our viewers the difference between pardon and parole?
Yeah, so a pardon is you've already gotten out, you've already been released, you've done your time and your sentence, you've completed your parole terms, and you're looking to have your rights restored. Parole is I'm wanting to get out of DOC, Department of Corrections custody, and be released, and then I'm subject to supervision by a parole officer. That's the difference. A pardon is just you've done everything, you just want your rights restored, whether it be a gun right or voting rights. Those are the two big ones, or the ability to serve in office.
Now, that's a question I get asked quite often. There is a procedure on the website of the Department of Pardon and Paroles that allows a person to fill out an application for a pardon.
Correct.
Which restores their right to hold office, sit on a jury, vote, the civil rights that are taken away when you have a felony conviction. But there seems to be some confusion about whether or not your Second Amendment right to possess a firearm is actually reinstated by the granting of a pardon at the state court level. Because there is a federal felony that makes it illegal for a felon to possess a firearm, whether they've been pardoned or not.
So even though you may get a pardon, you may be able to get your gun rights back, but not your right to vote back. Or you may be able to get your right to vote back, but not your right to get a gun, have a gun. So yeah, there's a lot of laws out there that even if you get a pardon, you're restricted as to how broad that pardon can be.
All right, we'll talk some more about that when we come back from break. This one got by us in a hurry. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. We're speaking with Cam Ward today. Thanks again for being with us. We were talking about pardons and the distinction between pardons and paroles, and we've established that a pardon is for someone who has done everything they're supposed to do, and now they want to get back in sort of mainstream citizenship, for lack of a better expression. Who makes that call? The same group?
The
Isn't there an
what we do is we send a list of the Bureau, which is the staff, the roughly 800 people that I oversee, sends them a list every day of these are people who should be considered for a pardon. But then the board, being autonomous, they decide one way or the other who gets one, who doesn't.
So, but as a citizen, as a lawyer, if I get a call from somebody that wants a pardon, I usually say, go to the website, there's an application.
Yep.
And they submit that application.
My personal philosophy is a pardon should be easy. If you've done everything, so let's just say I went to prison, then I was on parole, I completed my parole, paid all my restitution. Now, not court costs, I think that's a different issue. But if I paid all my restitution, I think you should get a pardon. That's just my personal opinion. But that's just maybe the board has a different opinion on that. But I think you should.
I think my problem is that I, and maybe many of our viewers, never understood what you've just explained to us, is that there's this distinction between what you do and what the Board of Pardon and Paroles does.
I spend a lot of, I would say 75, 80% of my time is spent on how do we supervise and provide better programming for people who've been paroled and how do they reenter society. But no, most of my job is not involved. I don't have a say in who gets pardoned or paroled, although I have an opinion on it and I've voiced that many times. But no, I don't have a vote on that issue.
Are we well staffed on parole supervision?
Yeah, we are well staffed. So I think technology has helped us a lot on how we staff that. I've been a big proponent not only of being less in office people, get away from the brick and mortar and having more people out and about supervising on the road, seeing people individually, making sure they're getting their medication, making sure they're going to their programming and making sure they're going to work, and less being in an office doing paperwork.
And
so
of course,
I think staffing level, you can always improve that, but I think we're getting to a better level now where we should be.
And of course, you have the ultimate leverage. If you don't do the things you're supposed to do, you get a parole hearing and possibly a revocation, and you go back.
And there's a lot of folks out there who argue, people, if they get sentenced to 10 years, they should serve the whole 10 years, which is called EOS, end of sentencing. That sounds good politically. That makes for great, you get a lot of votes doing that. The problem is, if you do that is if you serve no parole time, then the moment you walk out of prison door, you have no supervision and no one's watching over you to make sure you transition back the right way. And that's a recipe for failure. I think it is.
Well, back in the old day when I was a baby lawyer, a sentence, any number, was generally calculated as you'll serve a third.
Yeah.
Nowadays, depending on the class of felony, for the most part, you're going to serve, if it's a sentence in excess of 16 years, say, 85% or 15 years, whichever is less.
Now, one thing I'll commend prosecutors on this are when they do split sentencing. That's there's a lot of confusion what that means. So, in other words, I go in and say I'll get a split. They have to serve 4 years, and they have 8-year sentence. They serve 4 in, and they serve 4 on parole. What that means is 4 years guaranteed. You don't get out. You are stuck there for 4 years. There is no early release. But then for 4 years, you're being monitored. Prosecutors use that a lot on split sentencing, and I think they're not necessarily wrong. I think it's a good way to make sure someone is monitored for a period of time. You need supervision when you transition back into society, making sure whatever underlying issues were there are being dealt with.
Well, in that set, setup you just described, you take the parole board out of it altogether.
You don't, yeah, there's not a parole issue. You know
Yeah.
for a fact how long they're going to serve. Yeah.
And you come out and you're on probation.
Correct.
How about funding? Do we
Well,
have the funding available for
Yeah,
what?
the legislature was very kind to us. I presented them with a plan not only to increase staffing of parole officers, but also to increase our daily reporting centers for our reentry programs, our education programs, and our drug rehabilitation issues. And they gave us 30% increase, the largest of any state agency. So we plan to use that in a way that accomplishes my goals.
This is my last comment, but I was looking at yesterday's numbers, and today is June 30th. But apparently, local DAs follow parole cases throughout. They get notice when somebody wants to be on parole. Yesterday's cases had, I think, 36 applications.
I think 35, they denied 32 is what I think the latest number is.
That would be 0.9%.
Correct.
All of those were from Houston and Dale County. Isn't that odd to you? I mean, is that because those DAs are not those lucky 3 people? I just found that as an odd stat. I don't know.
You got to ask the board, but I'm not sure. I don't know if the DA opposed all those or not. I mean, they may oppose some of them, but at the end of the day, I think the question is whether or not what the board's subjective theory is on it.
All right. Thanks, Cam. I appreciate you taking the time. I think we could talk some more, but we'll have to do it the next time we visit. This is our all right. This is our Issues Birmingham. We'll see you next Sunday.
When you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique.
And your mother.
They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love.